Fan Original.
From Story Studio Network.
Kind of a weird day, right? Monday after Easter. By the way, April the 10th. Some people are working, some people aren't working. The people who are working are trying to figure out whether the extended folks that they work with are in the office or working. So it's weird because it's not really a holiday Monday, but Easter Monday is observed by the banks and all that stuff. So I don't know, sort of a half short week. Welcome in. Dave Trafford here for Now and Next at the Story Studio Network. Hope you enjoyed your Easter weekend. We were relatively busy on a do-nothing weekend and tired after the weekend. So I don't know how yours went, but had good fun. And James was doing his egg hunt at his Uncle Mike's house. We were over there for dinner last night. And every time James would find an egg and he'd put it in his basket, his father would take it out while he turned his back and he'd hide it again. The egg hunt went on for hours. It was quite enjoyable. And he never lost his enthusiasm for it. So it was quite fun. All right, welcome in. Lots to talk about here. Into the second full week of the mayoral race here in the city of Toronto, at least. And a few interesting things that sort of popped up. So we thought we would invite Barb Digiulio back into the show. How are you?
Hello. I'm good. I'm like you, a little bit tired. Not sure what day it is.
Well, you were dropping your son is graduating from Dalhousie, or
That's
has graduated?
Right. No, he's graduating. He's. I'm actually going out to Halifax in a couple weeks to pack him up and bring him home.
So how long will that process take to pack up? Are you there for a day in and a day out, or is it
I'm going on a Friday, and we're coming home Sunday.
Yeah,
so I figured we'll manage. We'll fit it all in.
That's reasonable. You're driving?
No,
okay.
He's selling a lot of his stuff.
Oh,
We had that conversation, and I'm sure you've been there. You know, at one point we thought we'll bring some stuff home, and then the cost of renting a vehicle and driving, and then bringing the stuff home, and do we have room for it? Might as well just sell it.
Well, and then the fact that it would be a 2-day trip there and a 2-day trip back if you're driving. So
exactly.
The worst I had to do was Montreal. So we managed to do that. And the farthest, I should say. It wasn't the worst. It was the farthest we had to do. But
here's a funny thing. As parents often do, we ended up getting quite a few things from IKEA.
Oh, yeah.
When he moved into his apartment. And that was 2.5 years ago, okay? The cost of everything. I'll give you an example. He has a couch. Actually, the couch is not even that old because he got a futon first and then it was so uncomfortable. We ended up getting him a couch. The couch has gone up in about 1.5 years by $300.
Wow.
It's crazy. The cost of all of that stuff. It's just sort of it wasn't even pre-pandemic. It was right in the pandemic to post-pandemic. The cost of all the goods and so many things are out of stock. And so it's not going to be difficult for him to sell. He sold a lot of stuff already.
Yeah, he could probably sell it. Somebody would get a good deal on it. And, he'd have a little bit of cash to make up for whatever his costs were for the
Exactly.
So yeah. Yeah, it's funny how you mentioned that because we were talking on the weekend about with the expanding family, and our place of meeting is at the family cottage. And so we're at a place now where we need to get the bunk beds for one of the rooms.
Oh, yeah.
And, well, we looked it up and we thought, well, we'll just order it from IKEA. And now we're going to have to do it in Toronto, but for whatever reason, they won't or can't deliver it to our house. I have to go and pick it up and order and have it picked up. But it's like about a 7-minute drive from where we live. So I don't quite understand the business model there anymore. But maybe it's to get you in the store. I don't know. That could be it. But
IKEA's always been a little different when it comes to delivery. Like delivery fees tend to be quite high compared to other places. Yeah, and I didn't know that there are certain items they won't deliver. You have to, I guess, click and collect. Is that what we're
Yeah,
doing?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So, and then it comes in 17 boxes, and do they all fit in
I
on the
know.
roof rack or whatever? So now it's the cost of renting a vehicle or a trailer. Anyhow. Anyway, I'm glad to hear that it's all going well, and he's excited to be back in Upper Canada. So, and I imagine you are not
Very well. Yes,
fairly
I'm
thrilled to have him
happy.
home. Yeah,
We're very happy to have him home. Yeah, and it's a process, the whole thing, and especially moving out there during the pandemic. It's just all been such a unique experience. And what's interesting is he's had a great experience, but I find that now that they've reached certain milestones, like the last sort of organized get together as students and different things pass, and he's suddenly now ready. They're all ready. Okay, I'm ready
yeah.
to come home. I'm going to miss it, but I'm very ready to come home. So I'm happy. It's all good. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, for those of you who are moving into that phase of your life, well, good luck with that, because there will be all that. There's still a transition, right? I mean, coming home and then the new jobs and all the stuff that's going to come with that, and then the anxiety of, are you living close to home, working close to home, are you moving out of market? So, and
Still
of
a
course,
lot ahead.
yes, for those of you who follow the show, you'll know Erin picked up and has been in Halifax since 2010, something like that. So it's and she's quite happy there. But here we are. Over the weekend, I had been sort of trolling through social media and starting to follow all of the major mayoral candidates. And it was interesting to me, I don't know if by accident or design, but I would say that Anna Bailau might have been the first one to come out and talk about what to do with Ontario Place. And she did so by saying, we're going to move the Science Centre, which is at Don Mills and Eglinton, at the one end of the Ontario line eventually, move the Science Centre down to Ontario Place and create housing, 1,500 units, and I think 500 of them would be affordable housing on that property. And whether it's a good idea or not, it ignited a pretty interesting debate about what to do with Ontario Place. And, you think about how the whole thing started, and I was digging around and I found some of the promotional material for Ontario Place from the 1970s. We're singing your song. It's very 70s.
So 70s.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That whole decade of music had such a sadness to it. I don't know what
Yeah.
it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's so emotional and
Yeah, just
just
very
over the top. The strings. And of course the backdrop is all these kids playing and having fun at Ontario Place. The visuals don't match the music at all, except the key change there. We just had the lift, right?
But everything sounded like that in the 70s.
Right, and so to some degree, I think that's why it's been so difficult to get anything done. There's that, the electric guitar and the strings together. Very Carpenter-ish.
Yes. Yes.
So, but I think that there's that whole sepia memory that's attached to it. Because when I was a kid, I was like, I don't know, 10 or 11 years old when it opened. So we were there all the time, right? We went to the Forum. We did the paddle boats around the islands. We went to Cinesphere. This was a place for us to go. It was and it was like relatively inexpensive. I think you had to pay a couple of bucks to get into the park, I think. But once you'd got it, you had the run of the park, right? You could go to the movie, you could go to the concerts, whatever it was. So it was a relatively inexpensive day for teenagers to go and hang around and have a ball. But I think we have attached our emotion and our history and our historic experience to that. And that is actually what slowed the whole thing down. We wanted to kind of have that frozen in time. I didn't go anymore, but don't bugger around with it, because, you'll screw around with my strings and guitar memory that we have of Ontario Place. So now here we are. What do we do with it? And I think it's an interesting debate. I think it's an important one to have right now. And, good that we've got a mayoral campaign right now in front of us that sort of ignites it. And what are we going to do with that piece of property?
So I think your points are all very good. And I hadn't really thought about the nostalgia factor. And maybe that's why people don't want things to change very much. It has been closed for a long time. Something needs to be done. I feel one of the biggest problems with our city is the lack of a proper waterfront. Just the lack of places to go and just walk on the waterfront and go to restaurants. It's all kind of broken up all the way along. But the thing with what the mayoral candidates are suggesting, and most of them, I think, are saying they're going to fight this planned spa that was announced. Does the company behind this development not already have a lease in place? And what actually could be done if someone wanted to cancel this development? See, that's what I'm not clear on. The candidates can come out and say, we don't want this to go ahead, we're going to fight it. But what I want to know is it too far gone to be able to do that? And if it is, why are we having this discussion?
Well, what's interesting is what's evolved out of this. Yes, it's provincial property, and Brad Bradford's saying, well, province owns it, province can do what it wants with it. So it's clear that he's kind of leaning one way, and certainly Mark Saunders would appear in a very convoluted way to be supporting it without saying anything definitive. That's going to be a problem for him, by the way, as he moves into this campaign further. Where is it you stand exactly on all this?
As I looked into the story from the Toronto Star this weekend, that was great. Mark Saunders, I didn't know, was paid to be pretty much a consultant on this project. So how do you do that and then turn around and go against it? It's a really difficult position to be in because he collected some good money to consult toward this.
Well, he's in a conflict right away. I mean, it doesn't matter, right? You'd have to declare that I was a paid consultant on this project, period. So when you look at all of the sort of the various angles of it, yes, it's provincial property, but there's access property that's owned by the city, the way I understand it. And to do all of they want to do, there'd have to be a land swap between the city and the province. And for the most part, on the one hand, you've got Josh Matlow saying, we're not going to do the swap, period. Mm-hmm. So that would kill the deal. And a bylaw not saying she doesn't want to go ahead with the spa, but wants to make sure that it's a place where it's integrated with the CNE grounds and so on, and much bigger picture. And I think we've lost sight of, to your point, the waterfront, the value of the waterfront, not just in terms of dollars and cents, but the access to that as a recreational space. And we've lost it at Ontario Place because we shut it down back in whatever it was, 2012, I guess.
I think, yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. So at that stage, I think this needs to have a serious conversation. I bristle more than a bit at the idea, if the grandkids and I want to go down to Ontario Place and we want to have fun in the water slide, that I have to pay $40 a head to get in. That bothers me a little bit.
But is that the proposal? That's not my understanding of it, and I could be wrong. I thought it was this separate area that would house this spa that has all of these amenities. It's funny, I didn't even really understand what this was, but I know someone who went to something like that recently in another part of the city. And if it is the same type of thing, you pay a certain amount to get in. You have access to, quiet rooms and cold rooms and hot rooms and saunas and different types of pools, sort of a lounging place. I don't know. But do you have to have that as part of your visit to Ontario Place if this thing does go ahead? Will there still not be the other parkland, I believe it's Trillium Park, that would be accessible to people? I mean, we need to know. I don't think anybody really understands exactly what this is going to mean, because people from the city want to still have access to the waterfront. That shouldn't be blocked.
No, exactly. But I think that I think that the spa part of it is expanded beyond what you're talking about. I think there are more recreational amenities in there that, my kids might want to take their kids to.
Water parkish type of things that you would want to go. Right. Okay.
So and you've sort of touched on the issue. The proposal's more than vague. Right, in terms of exactly what I'd be getting, but somebody's attached that $40 admission fee to get in to use it. You're right. There would be parts of the park that would be free, and away you go, and you can use it to your heart's content. I think, though, it's a little rich by half for those to complain and say, why should the government, or why should the people of Ontario and Toronto be subsidizing a private sector enterprise? We already do with the Budweiser Live Nation concert venue.
Right.
That's pretty much a private sector, exclusive run business out of there. It's not like you and I could go in and say, well, we're going to have something run, or it's not in the old days when it was the Forum and it was run by the folks at Ontario Place. They managed all the bands that came and went and the talent and so on. So, it's I think we go all the way or we don't go, and how do we make use of that space? What kind of return are we getting in terms of like the taxpayers are getting for the investment that we're making in a new concert venue that is pretty much being run and, exclusively run by private sector?
I wanted to mention something else and get your take on it. The other issue that I have is people who are complaining about building enough parking to accommodate something like this. And they don't like that a parking with, 2,000 spots is going to be built as part of it. Oh, wasn't Ontario Place and the downtown core supposed to be easily accessible by bike and transit? Newsflash, not everybody's riding their bike to go there. There will, if you are deciding to go with your grandkids, maybe you are able to take them on the TTC. Maybe you want to drive for the day and park down there. I think there's a big problem in the city with available parking. So if you're going to go ahead and build something like that, I think you do have to have enough parking to allow for people to come from outside of the city where public transit may not be an option or an easy option for them.
Acres of parking at the CNE grounds right now when the X isn't running, for one. So I'm not sure that that's the issue. Here's the problem that I have with it overall. If Infrastructure Ontario is involved in this now, so it's a government agency, and we're talking about spending $200 million plus the parking. Just imagine for a second that the Blue Jays came to Queen's Park and said, we would like a new stadium. Would you put up $300 million for us to have a new stadium or to renovate the dome, which is what they're doing right now? What kind of answer do you suppose they'd get?
Right.
Right?
Can it still be stopped?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
I think it can. I think it either stopped or modified. I don't think this is a done deal at all. And this may well be what ignites some voter interest, because it is an issue, right? It's a legitimate issue.
It absolutely is. And a part of me wonders, though, with everything else going on in the city, particularly the violence issue with public transit, I feel like that is going to be the main one. And I sometimes find there are certain issues where voters, yes, definitely interested. Are they as interested as people who work in the media? And I'm not sure, because does this affect everybody day to day as much as being able to ride the TTC safely and not be afraid? And I just wonder how much attention people are actually going to pay to it. I find it very interesting. I know you do. I just wonder what the average voter who's just sort of working and making ends meet and needing to take the TTC and being afraid to get on because of the stuff that's been going on. I wonder how it's going to land with them.
So I think that you've touched on the importance of the campaign, and that is to say, how do we frame this in terms that will be important to folks? And over the weekend, I saw Mark Saunders posting on social media, and he says it's something to the effect of being entirely dismissive of the other candidates, saying, none of them want to talk about public safety, and violence on the crime and public safety. That's my number one priority. Are you with me? So to your point, that's where he's poking his finger. But to have it be that binary, either you're for me or against me, because I'm for public safety and anti-crime, I think is a short-sighted campaign. One, because the answer is easy. affordable, stable housing is the best way to combat, crime and public safety issues. Now, that's a longer term issue for sure, building those homes. But we know, just based on the work that John Tory did in the final months when he was mayor, they boasted the ability to create these homes, the housing, modular housing, in a very short period of time. They built them in sometimes 6 months. So there is a model and a mechanism to do that. It's not as flashy and sexy, and doesn't cause outrage like crime and public safety might. But I think it's incumbent now upon the candidates to say, here's the path that we're going to follow to make sure that we have access to the TTC and it's safe, that we have housing, that we eliminate or we deal with public safety and crime issues on the street, as well as the longer term. So I think that Bailau's actual plan is something that can get you there. Does it ignite enough interest and excitement around the idea to say, that not only makes Toronto a greater city, it improves the housing, it actually puts it on the subway line where we need to have access down to Ontario Place from the Science Centre with the current spot. So I think there's a narrative that has to go there. The real magic is going to be in, the likes of a guy like Nick Kouvalis, who's going to be able to do his magic and say, this is how you have to frame that message to get from we want housing to it's a public safety and an anti-crime message.
Right. And not just, are you with me or are you against me?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
I just worry that, I'm not worried one way or the other. If I were in that campaign, I would worry that, you've just kind of you are a one issue candidate, period. We need a mayor who's going to be probably the mayor into the 2030s, right? I mean, the way incumbency works.
True.
So this is a vision that we're looking for as much as we are at solving a problem. But anyway, it will be good fun to watch as the whole thing tends to unfold right in front of us. And it sounds like a long way away, but June 26th is going to come in something of a hurry. Saw this piece, and this is not new, but it was really emphasized over the weekend about the grade inflation for high school grads, and it highlighted a young student who I think attended Don Mills Collegiate, and he wanted to get into the engineering program at Waterloo. And the whole point of it, he got in, but the point of it was that the university spends time looking at the difference between a graduate's average coming out of high school and then what their actual accomplishment is in year one. And they've tracked it over the years. And they have found that there are schools that have a greater gap. So let's say you came out of school X and you had a 90% average, you got in, and when you finished year one, you had an 81. Well, they would take that gap and look at it historically and see where it was. And so they can identify a school where a 90 is really an 81, where a 90 is really a 93 in first-year university. And they use that as a means of grading or accepting or, kind of putting kids in order and entering into the program. And there are all kinds of people who are, this is unfair. You're kind of picking on high schools. And I'm thinking, man, this has been one of those things that has been foisted upon the universities in varying degrees. They all kind of have their own way of figuring it out. To me, it's not the universities that we should be complaining about. Isn't it the high school issue? I mean, in terms of the grading systems and how we're promoting our kids out of grade 12?
If you have a student who has a 90 average or a 94 average in grade 12, it doesn't make sense that they should be failing in their first year of university. And if they are, then what does that 90 or 94 mean? And have they actually been prepared properly for university? And what I found really interesting is that a number of these schools are actually private schools that are, however this grade adjustment is done, they're the ones where the 91 might actually equal a 75 when the university looks at the history of how those graduates have fared in their first year of the program. And as you know, private schools, one of the things that they do tell parents is that we prepare students well for university, better than other high schools do. So this is, as soon as I read that UCC was one of them, I thought, oh, it's not going to go over very well with the people at UCC, with the parents of the students. And it's just one example of a number of schools. But as you mentioned, should we be angry at the university or should we be looking at the schools? And I guess the suggestion is they're inflating grades to get their students into university. But bottom line, you're not doing any student any favor by getting them in with a 90 that should have been an 80, and then they just struggle the first year. University is so challenging in many ways for students anyway. If they're struggling with the work, it's just an awful situation for them.
Yeah, well, and full disclosure, I mean, it's called prep school for a reason,
Right.
right? And we both have experience with kids going to prep school. So I don't know what your experience was, but ours was great in as much as, my son was really well prepared to tackle what happened in first year at McGill. And now he actually remarked in his first term how slowly he felt the programs were going
Yes.
for him. But then by, the end of first year, things caught up and everybody was sort of on a level playing field. But, that's anecdotal.
Well,
Period,
we had the same experience, but he also was not a 94 student. So he did struggle, but it was fair, I found, and he still felt more than prepared once he got to, and he did his undergrad at U of T. It was not easy, but he was able to manage.
Yeah. So I think, does this not kind of harken back to this standardized test to get into university? Wouldn't that just sort of solve the problem?
Having been through a number of those with one of my sons, it is, in some ways it seems like yes, but in others they seem so random, where you hate that an entire body of work comes down to a 3 or 4 hour test. I don't know what the answer is. That's a tough one for me because that has been grueling in its own way. And I'm not sure that that's the most fair way to do it. I know it's an option that people are looking at, but I'm not sure that's the most fair way to do it. I just think that the universities are the ones, especially engineering programs, very, very challenging, right? So if the universities have figured it out, well, we're looking at students from this school who come in with great marks and then end up really dropping off in the first year, which I think is expected for a lot of students anyway, to a certain extent. They're the ones looking at it and they know what they're doing. Do we have a problem with certain, not all, certain high schools and kids being given grades that they really shouldn't be given?
Well, maybe it's so the university should be showing their work to each other.
Yeah, perhaps.
I mean, what's the methodology at Waterloo versus, U of T or whatever? I mean, and let's face it, this isn't just an Ontario issue. I imagine this is right across the country in many respects.
Well, and a number of universities say they don't do that at all. They just take the grades at face value.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, you could probably still track at the end of year one what is the difference. It doesn't mean that they may not observe it, but you could actually look at the trend, and if you actually followed it, you can probably prove that, yeah, this is happening at schools, and it might not just be at Waterloo's engineering program. It might be reflected right across various universities, depending on the first year experience. Boy, there's lots to talk about. This is one of the great season to be a sports fan. I mean, we just got through the Masters and the the weather was the story. Holy cow! Did you? The trees came crashing down, and the weather map was brutal. And stories that came out of it: Tiger Woods making his 23rd straight cut. It was a record time, but couldn't finish because and they said it wasn't necessarily because of his leg injuries, but it was a contributing factor. But I don't know what looks more pathetic, and I say that with all due respect. I don't mean that in a derogatory point. Like, you had to have some empathy, sympathy for a guy who has that kind of legacy and history in the game. No matter what he might have done in his personal life, put that aside, his willingness to compete, and he could barely walk around the course for that.
It was a hard thing to see, because we don't want to see someone like, and again, this is not personal, this is strictly about his history in sports. You don't want to see Tiger Woods limping around looking like an old man, just can barely walk. I thought it was kind of funny, and not also in a derogatory way, that he said his plantar fasciitis is acting up again. And I'm like, you don't even have a real leg anymore. You do and you don't. Like, your entire leg has been rebuilt. I'm in some ways shocked that he can still walk on it at all. It was hard to watch him. It was hard to watch him like that. And the thing with Tiger Woods is he has been so trained to be the athlete that he is from the time he was a toddler that I don't think he knows anything else. I think he will compete until he has nothing, and I mean nothing, left to compete with. Mm-hmm. He just can't. It's him. It's who he is.
Yeah, and I think there's a certain. It's easy to say, well, he's getting old, and we'll do, just kind of watch him fade away, but. I think the players around him probably think, oh my, they have more respect than I think we know for what he has done and what he does.
Not only that, because you're right with that, but I also think it's Tiger Woods. Anything could happen. He could come back and win the PGA championship. Yeah. It wouldn't surprise you. It wouldn't surprise me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's always that feel to it, right? I think it's interesting that, and for good reason, CBS makes sure that he's one of the featured, pairs and as they're going around the court. And he, was already, I think by the time I turned it on, was already 10 back or something like that.
Yes.
But there was always a sense, will he make the cut? Can he fight to make the cut, right?
I wonder if the weather hadn't turned, if that might have.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, but there is that. But on the other hand, you had, Phil Mickelson with the best finish for a guy in his 50s at there. So, the old dogs were still drawing a whole lot of attention on that golf course over the weekend. So, nonetheless, it sure marks the turn into spring. I was talking to Rod Black a couple weeks ago, and this is, like I said, a great time to be a sports fan. The Leafs signing the young phenom out of NCAA hockey, Matthew Nyes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he may play, I guess, maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. Anyway, they've got 3 games left, so if you're a Leaf fan, you'll get a chance to see him. But all the numbers being thrown around, I thought it was cool on the weekend where you've got, Marner looking at a 100-point season. They're all excited about it, but they don't. To me, the Leafs' kind of future vis-a-vis playoffs was set, back in February, right? And so as I watched them over the last couple of months, it was almost like they didn't have anything to play for.
Right.
They didn't play badly. In fact, they played really well against teams that they were going to have to probably, perform against in postseason. So that was good. But, they'd come up with a stinker every once in a while, and when they were playing, teams that weren't even going to be in the playoffs. But what I like about watching these guys is that they are honestly having fun doing it without all of the pressures and the commentary from, the sports know-it-alls who just, for whatever reason, when I turn it on, they want to find some kind of reason why they're going to fail. That's always the lead.
That's part of covering the Leafs in this city. I love the Marner thing. I love that. Sittler, Gilmore, and I believe twice each, and only Austin Matthews, the other Leafs, to hit that point. And I think that the team, I think they'll probably find a way to help them get it done. I think it's a lot of fun. I love the U of T goalie being put in for a minute at the end of the game. I believe Jet Alexander. That was really fun. What an experience. How frightening when he thought he might have to go in earlier in the game when Samsonov looked like he was injured, right? There are a lot of fun little stories. So the fans love the stories and the media loves to pounce because that's just how it's always been in this city. The Leafs, original six, playing in a fishbowl. That's what you get when you become a Maple Leaf. That's the sort of attention you will always get in this city. You don't want it? There are markets you can play that you can walk down the street and nobody knows who you are.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of them wouldn't be Edmonton. I mean, the way that crew is playing.
Yes.
So the interesting, I flipped through and was being geekish on the weekend. I'm just kind of floating through all of the numbers in terms of, who rises to the top. The Leafs and the Oilers, I think, are the only two teams in the NHL that have 430 goal scorers.
Wow.
Right? So, and you look at, I think Boston only has one, and it's Pasternak, who scored 60. Maybe two. And again, Tampa has a couple or three. So it was really interesting when you start to look at why they're fun. Well, because they score a lot of goals.
Yes.
Right? And it's just fun to watch them do that. But here we go. We're a week or so away from that first round, and everybody will get their knickers in a knot over will they win the first period? Who will score the first goal? Does home ice mean anything? So there will be the sort of that perennial discussion. But I would not want to be that management team right now. That's sort of the frontline management team, the general manager, the coach, because if they don't win, these guys are toast. And look at the season that they've had, right?
Look, I think that is, I'm not quite sure how to put it, but that is just the reality. Somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. And it's probably worse when you've had a good season, when you've had a lot of goals scored and a lot of points. You know what? Anything can happen. Let's see what happens with the Tampa Bay Lightning. I mean, you know what? And then ultimately look at Boston down the road. Is there a team that's going to beat Boston? It's always something to watch with interest because anything can happen. But it's less likely that anything can happen when you're looking at a 7-game series versus a 1-game.
Yeah.
Right?
For sure. Yeah. Well, and if you take it by that, I mean, even Tampa has looked pretty ordinary over the last few weeks, like winning, losing, like big games or big numbers to teams that aren't in the playoffs, sort of typical of what the Leafs have been going through. So
they call it a second season for a reason.
Yeah, exactly. And who's going to have their head in it and who's going to be prepared. So anyway, and I'm glad that the weather's taken a turn because it means now that the sports bars will have the patios open and we'll be able to kind of enjoy the games as we should during the spring. Blue Jays will open this week at home, and I don't know about you, but again, I have this feeling when they're playing 600 ball right now. I mean, that's pretty good.
Yep.
But there's a certain feeling around the team or the media anyway that they're underperforming, that they're not, they're not firing on all cylinders. Again, I don't know what you have to do to impress. Now, again, there are some of the pitchers who are having some issues and, individual games, but holy cow, you're starting at 600 of your first 10 games and then you're coming home, which typically would, put some wind under your wings. You would think this is a harbinger for good things for the Blue Jays.
And there are so many games in a Major League Baseball season, so to have, I can't imagine the pressure it must be. Now, they get paid well for it. I'm not saying that we should feel sorry for them, but how much pressure it would be to have every game dissected that way. when the season is so long, right? And the conversation in the first week, 2 weeks is always, oh, it's too early. It's too early to worry about them. Are they a playoff team? Are they not a playoff team? It's still so early. Take the games as they come. This is sort of a long game thing, right? They managed to come off of that opening road trip to start the season with a 6-4 record. Great. Coming back home, exciting new changes at Rogers Center with all of, the renovations and all of that. Well, let's see what happens. But I think it is the nature of playing in this market that you just get picked apart for everything.
Well, I think the worst thing that happened was there were a number of commentators who actually have them not only playing in the World Series, but winning it. And that was before they even threw a pitch.
Very brave, very bold. I don't know who makes that prediction. That's the hill you choose to die on. It's yours all season long. All season long.
Yeah, indeed. And it'll always come back to bite you. I love the story that you come across with the Mavericks and being investigated because it appears as though they were trying to tank to improve draft position. It shocks me a little bit that a team would do that. On the other hand, it doesn't shock me that would be part of an implied conversation in a number of leagues. I mean, Connor Bedard is number one. Who's tanking to get that kid in the NHL?
It's something I think that is a challenge in every league. And unfortunately, it seems as though a number of leagues sort of look the other way, because it's a very difficult thing to have to deal with. The Dallas Mavericks, so their coach, Jason Kidd, I think it was before the game, said they were going to sit Kyrie Irving and a number of other players, and was asked and actually admitted, which may not be good for his career with the Dallas Mavericks, that, yes, it came from above. And Mark Cuban said, you're going to sit these players in a game where they needed to win in order to remain in playoff contention. So they lost, and by doing so and becoming one of the 14 NBA teams that does not make the playoffs, they get a higher opportunity in the NBA draft lottery to get top or close to top pick. Here's the thing. Mark Cuban was fined for the same thing 4 or 5 years ago for talking about the fact that he would be willing to tank and perhaps had tanked. He was fined $600,000. So, maybe he's in the land where he's rich enough that he doesn't care if he gets fined again. I'm not sure. I think that leagues have difficulty trying to figure out how to deal with this. And the way they've set up the draft lottery was an attempt to avoid that happening. So tanking to the point where you're the worst team in the league, you get the first pick. Well, now it goes into a lottery. Incredibly blatant. And I don't know how that's going to play with the coach actually coming out. You could have said they're injured. We're resting them. There's something. Got them on the injury list tonight or something. But no, we decided to sit them, and that's the way it goes. It came from above, and so yes, I'm on board.
Well, I don't know if it came from above, but you're talking about the $600,000 fine. Just to put it into perspective, I was watching the Milwaukee Raptors game last night, and they sat their frontline players because they're in the playoffs, so they want to rest them going into the playoffs. They did the calculation. There was nearly $250 million in starter salary sitting on the bench for both teams. So $600,000.
Yeah. Someone like Mark Cuban?
Sure. Yeah, I'm not sure it works. Barb Digiulio, it's always good to talk to you.
Great to talk to you.
Enjoy opening week at home here in Toronto, and we'll chat again soon.
Thank you. We'll talk soon, Dave.
Now and Next is produced by Becky Coles. Our production manager is Jamie Nickerson. Audio editors are Mike Trutler and Drew Garner. And our sonic logo designer is Greg McDonald. Our executive producers are Dave and Aaron Trafford.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.